Well, welcome to Josh. Welcome, everybody. Josh is actually the first designer that I ever asked to speak in a class back at Pratt Institute where I was teaching, and I think it was in 1996. Don't know if you remember, but I think I asked you sort of every year. So was running the program at RIT and was recently named the distinguished professor and director of the Vignelli Center. Is that the correct title?
Yeah.
Which is a really huge deal. And I know, and I don't know if Josh is going to talk about it, but you can probably ask him about his personal, very close relationship with Massimo and Leila Vignelli, and lots of stories there. I would say that Josh is like in the top 3 industrial designers that I've ever met. He knows I think this about him, that every single product he has done is like a perfect product. If it needs, and I know, it sounds hyperbole, but if it needs a little humor, then he's got humor. If it needs some sort of ergonomic, eureka, then it's got the eureka. If it needs to be like just beautiful, then Josh can make it beautiful. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. So when Alan asked me to put something together for tonight, I thought that I would sort of give you a little bit of everything. And a little bit of everything means talking about me as a designer and an educator and a human being. I've kind of reached a point in my career, as Alan mentioned, I'm the director of the Vignelli Center for Design Studies and the Massimo and Leila Vignelli Distinguished Professor at RIT, where a lot of what I do coalesces in what I refer to as stewardship. It's being more than just a designer, more than just an educator, but something in between and something beyond, which helps to advance design on a global level. So people often ask, what is good design? I feel good design is complexity distilled into simplicity. Good design makes things better. And I've forged a career essentially in creating conditions that make things better for students, for colleagues, for people in general, for the planet, bringing what has amounted to a wide range of different experiences, not just as a designer and an educator, but as a writer, as one who is passionate about collecting design, disseminating it in a variety of ways. And I've had experience in all these different kind of aspects that do help for me to kind of bring that stewardship that I mentioned. So I thought I would talk to you about sort of 3 pieces of this complex puzzle: my professional work, my student work, and then my vision for the Vignelli Center and the work that I am currently embarking on. So in terms of my qualifications or what I come with, a little bit about me and my personal history. I have an interesting background, I suppose. My father is an archaeologist, and I grew up going with him every summer on archaeological excavations, mostly in the Middle East. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but we're pretty sure that's me there with the baseball cap at around 13 or 14 years old. But I started when I was about 6 or 7. It wasn't really an option. Summers were not, there was no summer camp. It was, I was cheap labor going on these excavations and working with my father and his students from around the world on these sites. And one might imagine that a 6 or 7-year-old might not like getting up at 4 in the morning and getting into a hot hole in the ground and digging in the earth. And if, by the way, you're thinking of Indiana Jones, it's not really what we experienced. It's a lot more of a slow peeling away of earth and finding tons of tiny fragments of history put back together. But I was really curious about history, and I learned a great deal from understanding materiality and observing the various technologies, documenting the items that we found. And my curiosity was really honed, I would say, during those early years on these digs. And I developed a kind of work ethic too. I mean, it was very hard work, and we had to be very, very diligent about the work we were doing to make the observations that led to understanding history. Another piece that's more nature versus nurture. I was always a creative from as early as anybody can remember. I was drawing. I was interested in photography as I got older. Eventually became very passionate about sculpture, painting, and playing music and writing. When I began my undergraduate years, I explored all those mediums. I was a dual major at Cornell in fine arts and visual studies, essentially anthropology. And so I used these mediums that I had already been exploring: photography, drawing, began to sculpt and to paint. And I continued to play music, kind of nights and weekends in various bands. When I was a junior in undergraduate, I won an award to study abroad in Rome. And this kind of funny picture that I'll come back to later, but that's me sitting in the Capitolio with my photos guide, trying to figure out what to see, I think. The Renaissance masters that I was studying, Leonardo, Bernini, Michelangelo, I was taught that they were artists or engineers, sometimes architects, technologists. What I learned, or what I observed for myself in studying these individuals through their works during that time, was that they were all these things. And in fact, all these things together are like design. And so I had this kind of epiphany that I'd been studying fine arts and anthropology. And really the combination of fine arts, materials, form, meaning, content, context, process, and anthropology, semantics, environment, beliefs, history, culture, behavior, experience, taken together, were the building blocks of design. And I sort of came back to Cornell, having finished my junior year, and thought, well, I guess I need to take another degree or enter into another major. I did finish out my undergraduate, but that idea that design is this overarching theme became a sort of guiding principle for the remainder of my education. So I ended up at Rhode Island School of Design for my master's. And during that time there, really kind of synthesized what I had learned in pieces as an undergraduate and began to do exploratory works of design with the intent of working as an industrial designer when I got out of my 2-year program there. When I did, I moved to Philadelphia. This is sort of fast forwarding probably 6 or 7 years after that initial move. But I eventually started up a small independent consulting practice, which happened really by necessity. I was trying to just pay the bills, working as a freelancer, and eventually things got good enough that I could do a little bit more than pay the bills. And this was the studio that I had for about 8 or 9 years before leaving Philadelphia. During the period that I was working as a designer in Philly, I started teaching as an adjunct at Philadelphia University. I was kind of invited to teach a class, and I really fell in love with teaching. I had no idea that I would fall so fast and so hard for it. And quickly started leveraging my experience in industry into the classroom, and started this annual program called Build, which was an industry partnership. And we took our work to ICFF in the first iteration, won an award. And so it inspired me and my colleagues to do more of this kind of mixing of industry in the classroom. And this became a prototype for what I ended up doing later, which I'll talk about soon. So I did take a full-time teaching position at Philadelphia University, and I stayed there in the industrial design program for a decade, helping my colleagues build the program. As I said, fell in love with teaching and fell in love with this intersection between teaching and practice that really kind of promoted the idea of experimentation. I loved what I found in the classroom, working with young people and helping them explore their ideas and taking that energy to my own practice. And so that time in Philly really sort of solidified my, you could say, my identity as a designer, educator, and my path. I did, in the last couple of years in Philly, teach at University of Pennsylvania. They invited me to their graduate architecture program to teach a course which connected the dots between the Wharton Business School, the engineers, and the architects via design. That was quite an interesting time for me. And at the same time was a member of a board at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is called CoLab, where I helped build and advance a student design competition. So these were all the kind of building blocks of my early career. And at the same time, my wife and I had 2 kids, and we were bringing up a family. And a lot of people like this slide and refer back to it. It's my way of simplifying my own priorities. Family always comes first. But I think what's interesting for you guys is that academics and practice are on the same plane. And so that really underscores this agenda that I have of kind of bringing my experience in industry to the classroom and vice versa. So this is every year we do a postcard, my family, and this was, I think it was, we always give a little tagline, and the tagline this year was, I think, jumping into 2010. And so 10 years ago, in 2010, RIT called, and to make a long story short, I accepted the offer. We made a move, the whole family, from Philly to Rochester. We loved Philadelphia. We lived in the heart of Center City. It was a great life. Rochester was just a completely different thing. As I mentioned to Christina when we were talking earlier, we lovingly refer to Rochester as the Great White North. So that the tagline for our first year's postcard was, "Cold is the new hot." You really have to bundle up, but there's no bad weather, just bad clothes, we've learned. So Rochester, I lovingly say, is centrally dislocated here close to Lake Ontario, a long way from New York City. We found a beautiful context surrounded by nature here in the Finger Lakes region. If you ever get a chance to come up after COVID, it's a fantastic place to visit. But we are close, to some urban centers. Rochester is forged by innovation. That squiggly line that connects New York to Albany to Rochester, Buffalo represents the Erie Canal, which was in fact an engineering marvel that created a pathway for culture and commerce. So in a way, Rochester was built by innovation, a kind of original American boomtown, with some blue chip companies, some remarkable institutions in the area. We saw it when we moved here as a place that was primed for reinvention, as Kodak was in its kind of waning days. However, the entrepreneurial brain trust from Kodak is everywhere in the fabric of Rochester and in RIT and U of R and the businesses here. We saw a human-scaled city in Rochester, and one that is, as I said before, quite connected really to New York and to Toronto by plane. So that for me and for my family felt like a great global operations base. So I mentioned the Vignelli Center for Design Studies. The Vignelli Center is a kind of a unicorn on the RIT campus, a kind of a magical center, which was being built at the time that I was being recruited. So this was one of the great magnetisms for me, even though I had no idea that 10 years later I would be the director of the center. Um, I've always had reverence for the Vignelli's work, and going back to that picture I showed you earlier, funny connection here is that I was reading this photos guide in the early 1990s. It was guiding me through my experience and my revelation of design in Italy, and I had no idea at the time that Massimo Vignelli had designed that book. So it's been a kind of remarkable honor to have mentorship from directly from the Vignellis. Really, this is my colleague Roger Remington, who's my predecessor in the Vignelli position. He, together with Massimo and Lella, created both the opportunity and the reality of the Vignelli Center. And in those early days at RIT, when I was running the industrial design program, I had the good fortune to both meet and work with Massimo and Lella, mostly Massimo, to be fair, because Lella's health was waning at the time that I met her. In any case, the work that I have done in the Vignelli Center, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, really has to do with leveraging the ethos that the Vignellis left us. And this is just a lovely note that he wrote me. Massimo wrote me early on, sort of talking about how we were using the archives to do the work that he had intended for them to do. Oops. And suddenly stopped here. Hang on a second. There we go. So I've been a bit of a participant in a shared mission as a supporter of the Vignelli's work. So I'm going to come back to all the Vignelli stuff in a minute. Would like to take a few minutes to share my professional work with you. Josh Owen LLC is my business, my design operation, which continues to function outside of my work as an educator. I'm sitting here in the same room that we're looking at photos of. I think it's a little cleaner in these photos than it is right now, but it's the same room. Should give you a sense of my organization and my workflow. I'm not going to talk actually about really any of these projects, but rather tell you that I play the role of an independent designer. I've worked for a lot of different clients in different places in the world. And I've been fortunate to work with really good clients, ones that understand the value of a designer's perception and ability to solve problems in unique ways, which are unlike engineers or material scientists or marketing professionals, but as one who's able to work with all those different kinds of professionals to move ideas forward. And I feel quite fortunate to have been able to work on so many projects that I had a large degree of authorship over. And it feels probably too like these are a lot of projects as I scroll through them, but in truth, it's a kind of less or more philosophy that less is more philosophy that I've taken over the years, excuse me, by working on fewer but better projects. We really only have a few major projects going at any given time. And over the course of a year, maybe I'll release 2 or 3 new things. So that independent designer role has suited me well alongside of my work as an educator. And I'll stop just on this one because it just came out. And this has been 2 years in the making. It's a guitar pedal or a pedal, an effect that one can plug an electric instrument into. And I'll simply say that it was a wonderful project that that began because I had a lot of experience as a musician, and there was a kind of a soundscape that I wanted to be able to create and share with other musicians. And I was fortunate to find a company that makes these kinds of devices here in Rochester that was intrepid enough to work with me to try to resolve a device that would allow players to utilize these tools. It was extra special because my son, who's just got accepted to architecture school, designed the graphic for me that I find is nice and contemporary and fits with the vibe of the company. The other thing that's very fresh is fresh meaning brand new, was that the company sent the pedal to some influencers out there who they thought the pedal would resonate with. And this is Bootsy Collins. For those of you who don't know, he was one of the original bass players with James Brown, and just a remarkable player who's still out there on the scene. So this is a really fun picture that he sent when he received the pedal. So I've worked with a lot of manufacturers, as I mentioned, around the world, and under the encouragement of students and some clients, I put together a book a number of years ago to offer design lessons on my approach, my ways of seeing in making complex simple. And the book was published in 2016, and it decodes the process behind a lot of these projects that I didn't talk about when I scrolled through them earlier. It's, I think, a useful tool that explains theory and practice. So besides the writing and the design projects I do, I create exhibitions, I give these sorts of lectures, and I do workshops, and I've done those in many places in the world. My projects are often published. I see I've got Alan Score 77 in there. And for me, that's not a pat yourself on the back sort of thing. It's really about being part of the dialogue and making these things relevant by making them part of a continuum of design conversations. So there are a number of these projects are in different museums. And again, for me, that's quite gratifying, not because it represents some sort of trophy, but that it's part of a conversation, part of a dialogue. So now I'm going to take a few minutes to talk to you about some of my student work that Alan alluded to earlier. Basic, kind of marching orders for me are that I want to foster excellence, and that's a tough thing to do as an educator. But I found that if students can see themselves as professionals, meaning that they publish, they exhibit, they produce, that at least for me, that's been a great way to advance, to lead by example, and to share that with students. And I know Alan also believes in these principles, and you guys are so fortunate to be, for example, working with MoMA to do the same. So on the undergraduate level, I developed a course called the Meta Project. And this was something that I developed, as I said, kind of on the heels of that build project that I started in Philadelphia. The Meta Project was an attempt at linking the industrial design program that I had joined when I came to RIT a decade ago with the Vignelli Center, and trying to develop a program that would sort of further the Vignelli ethos in a way that would connect students to a global venue, and give them this platform for success. So the first meta project that we did, it was designed for materiality, brought in a partner, Wilson Art International, and explored their materials in furtherance of their agenda, which was to make furniture objects. And these things were planned to be exhibited in New York City as part of Design Week. And right there, you can see young Alan Chachinow, still looks the same, as one of the jurors as part of the final student exhibition at RIT. The work was juried by Wilson Art and others like Wendell Castle and Alan. And we curated an exhibition and brought it to ICFF in New York. And it got, I guess what I could say are good reviews and a fair amount of attention. And because of that, we decided to sort of take this meta project idea and repeat it. So in the second iteration, I approached Corning Museum of Glass, which is just down the road from us here in Rochester, and I highly recommend you all visiting it if and when you get a chance. They're just an incredible institution. And so we were working on a project with them and showed this at a fairly new venue at the time, which was Wanted Design. And at this point, after doing the first meta project, Massimo and Lella were quite intrigued and working alongside of us. And so Massimo was one of the jurors to select the works in Meta Project 2. And then an interesting thing happened, which I hadn't planned for, which was that my friends at Kickerland, a company that I had designed products for, came by the booth and they loved one of the student projects. So I thought, well, let's see if we can find a way to put this into production, and helped walk the student through the various steps of preparing the project for protection and for industrial reproduction. And Corning was very generous in allowing this to happen, and RIT was quite generous in letting the student, kind of receive all the royalties and get out of the way. And what that did for me was present the idea that if we went into a project with the manufacturer that the outcome of which was planned to be production, we could be better prepared for success. So O3 was with AreaWare, and you guys probably know them as a New York-based company. And AreaWare was a client of mine. I made some things for them in the past, and they were always looking for the next generation of designer. So I proposed that I help them find them by bringing my students to the table. So again, the Vignellis involved. We brought the work to ICFF, and James Paulius, one of my students, made this piece called Blockitecture, which I think now there's something like 26 or 27 versions of that he's made. He's quit his day job and essentially, does just fine making these projects for AreaWare. But that started in the classroom. And I brought the whole idea to upper management in RIT, told them that I thought it would be great if we could get the RIT logo on the box, and they did not get in my way. And, when I was the director of the industrial design program over the years that followed this project, I would regularly get students who, when I asked, how did you know about the program? They said, well, we saw it on the back of a box in Tokyo MoMA. So it was really kind of interesting to see that that project not only forged the career of one individual, but it forwarded the reputation of our program. I knew things were going well when Herman Miller called and asked us to explore the future of work. This was just a fabulous project, and Miller was such a generous and gracious host. They built all the prototypes. They flew all the students out to their design yard in Michigan, and we worked with the engineers to fabricate everything and brought it to ICFF. Really innovative and interesting work. 05 was with two partners, Kickerland and Bed Bath & Beyond. They basically brought their best retail partner, which was fascinating. And then it was kind of a meta project in that they asked students to design for themselves, essentially for college age students, storage for college. And then I did another thing, which was to partner with an alum who owns the Lazzoni brand, which has some showrooms in New York. And we had this big party in New York. And that's what you see here in the bottom. And this was a really great kind of alumni event, which we continued in the next meta projects as a way to continue to get our students and our alumni together during Design Week. '06 was with another New York-based company, Poppin, and I'm quite friendly with a guy called Jeff Miller, who's the design director there. And Jeff invited us to design essentially accessories for their furniture. And this was just another fabulous project. Poppin was so generous with their time and expertise. And the students, all the works were curated into the exhibit. Sometimes in the past, we've had to curate out some of the works to make sure that the exhibit in Design Week is strong. Here we took everything and won an editor's award. And again, thinking about production, this piece won and is in mass production and sells all over the place. In fact, somebody just told me today that it was in an Intuit ad or some television commercial. It was a prop. I haven't had a chance to track it down. But anyway, once again, using the RIT brand to sort of promote the project. '07 was with Umbra, our first international collaboration across the border. And Umbra was another kind of magical partner and strong output. This was the piece that was commercialized, designing for them. '08 was really, really exciting. For the first time, we sort of tossed the whole product design idea by the wayside, worked with an alum from our program who is a restaurateur in Rochester and has now 5 or 6 restaurants, which are very good. In particular, the bar at Good Luck is written up nationally quite regularly. In any case, Chuck gave us the restaurant, and the students had to work as a hive mentality. So they had to work together to design an experience, design the whole evening. And so it was probably the hardest project I've ever done, not just for me, but for the students. They had to articulate a business plan, raise the money for their materials, and figure out a way to get diners in there. So they ended up selling, I think there was $200 a seat, but they sold out 60 seats at $200 a head, and that money went to all of the different things that they designed. They worked with the chef, they worked with the staff, they created a music and lighting set of environments. They designed all the food essentially with the chef and the way it was presented. There's actually a really great video online if you're interested of the whole night. The table setting was changed 4 times, and the final setting was a thermochromatic liquid crystal surface. And when people put down their hot toddies, they made all kinds of patterns and so on. And there was a performance going on, which revealed the title there at the end. In any case, we brought this work to ICFF with our video, and students sat with people and shared the video on iPads. And then each year we publish a book, so we give out these free books about the experience. '09 was with Sesame Street, which was really a great pleasure, and we focused on design for play, and play being an urgent condition in our current atmosphere. And there were some really wonderful pieces that came out of that project. And once again, we showed in New York. There's Elmo with the Meta Project, and had our usual party where we invited industry folks. And I think this is the last one that I'm just going to click through. And this one was quite exciting. This, again, before I was invited to consider taking on the directorship, I wanted to celebrate 10 years of the Vignelli influence on the Meta project. This is my predecessor, who was a judge. This is our archivist, Jennifer Whitlock, who was a judge, and another archivist from a different collection on campus. And the students all designed a project called Design for Time, which was connected to the theme of a decade of the Vignelli Center. So same deal for graduate students, and this is probably particularly pertinent for you guys, but I also feel that graduate students need to see themselves as, design professionals, using the same modalities to imprint their ideas. But I do think that on a graduate level, there's a higher premium placed on intellectual exercises. The pragmatism tends to fall to a slightly lower level, focusing more on original research. This course, like the Meta project, had its own brand called Activating the Archive, in which students were meant to begin their process by researching in the Vignelli archives. We do work on occasion with industry partners. In this case, we did with LOL Designs, kind of a ecologically friendly outdoor furniture company. That's Greg, the CEO of LOL, who came to campus on a number of occasions. And the company did build a number of the projects that we exhibited at Wanted Design. And this piece by Bridget Sheehan was put into production and remains a product today. And another interesting thing about this, and I won't go too in depth onto this conversation, but I started an archival project at RIT within the Vignelli archives, building what I call product time capsule, which is storytelling around the process of different design pieces that is done in concert with students. So I work with students to select and archive pieces that then become teaching tools. And our little committee decided to archive Bridget's student project because of its exemplary process. And so now it's kind of a meta thing in which students can come and study Bridget's exemplary process and leading to that produced product. This was a project we did with Corning Museum of Glass, investigating different rituals around drinking. Same kind of approach in that we built our prototypes and then went to Corning, and Corning selected a number of the pieces to work with the students to fabricate. It was a really remarkable opportunity. And then more recently, a project with Steelcase and Mark McKenna, who's one of the design directors, where he had presented us with a kind of a interesting table base that's meant to have different tabletops, and each student kind of designed a ritual to go on the tabletop, and these were the results of these ritual explorations. Steelcase was very generous with visiting. That's Mark there, sharing his insight, and then we had a big event in their penthouse overlooking the park to show off the work during Design Week. So lastly, I'll just tell you a little bit about kind of my stewardship of industrial design in the Vignelli Center. And, I guess I spent a lot of time on all these pieces: mission building, team building, mentoring, fundraising, dealing with facilities and partnerships, the creation of different fellowships and working with alumni. All these pieces are what helped me to move the industrial design program forward. And I sort of learned many of these things on the job, took a department that looked like this, rebranded it, and now It looks like this after a fair amount of fundraising. We did a lot of kind of invented a lot of community events. This is something we call T minus. We have a rather large program. In total, the industrial design programs, meaning the undergraduate and the graduate, have about 300 warm bodies. So this was a community building event that we've done now for about 8 or 9 years in a row. Beginning first week of every spring semester, we get everybody back. We kick off the week by having them work together on teams of 5, 1 freshman, 1 sophomore, 1 junior, 1 senior, 1 grad. They get a brief that they don't know about. It's a secret until they get it. They have 1 week to solve the problem. And this is what it looks like a week later when they all present the results of their research. And guided workshops. You know, I love to talk about design, so I do these kinds of things whenever the university or private, institutions are interested in having a design guide. This was a wonderful trip to Iceland that I did for RIT a couple years ago. Workshops at Bois Boucher in France. Big advocate of study abroad, and helped to continue to have our industrial design students at the Bauhaus in Germany and at DIS in Denmark. Also big on connecting our alumni back to RIT and Shop One, which is our retail space, is a partnership that I work closely with to bring our alumni works back into a place where they can be disseminated. And that shop has a great website, and so it's a great way of building community, seeing all the things that our alums produce. I started getting involved with the Vignelli Center early on, as I mentioned, and we have a wonderful lecture series, just like the one that's happening tonight. And we've brought in just remarkable people. Alan is one of them. Here's, I think, an image of Joe Doucet speaking a couple of years ago. Antenna Design have been a number of times to join us. Carolyn Bauman from Cooper Hewitt. This year, we've had to go online, but we've continued. I think this is the old poster, but at any rate, we've had a very successful launch of our web-based series with Design Milk, who is our industry partner for promoting the Design Conversations lecture series. And Design Autopsy is another project I started, I think the second year I was the director of industrial design. And this is an alumni event where we profile 10 alums going back to the early days of the ID program, which started in 1970. And we do an exhibition, we bring the alums to campus, and we mix up the alums with the students and the faculty and do panel discussions, really just a rich dialogue that has been so useful for our cohort over the years. Each one presents this kind of autopsy of a project of theirs, and that's what those displays are. Wendell Castle, who you may have heard of, famous sculptor, furniture maker, designer, who shows in New York and other parts of the world, recently passed away, but he's based here in Rochester, and we did this collaborative philanthropic project together where we each made one half of a set of bookends, and the proceeds all go back to the industrial design program on which he taught, mostly for our graduate students. He taught a course. And I mentioned earlier my archival interest. This is the product time capsule. And as I said, we bring in these projects and they represent a whole trajectory of the work, meaning not just the final piece, but also all the business conversations from sort of cocktail napkin sketch to fruition. And we often do events where we bring in the designer and the manufacturer to talk about the process with students. That's what this is, an image of. These are some of the pieces that are in the collection. And these are some students at work on the Product Time Capsule initiative, cataloging and archiving. We have a fellowship in place with Corning now as a result of so many great projects with them. We do a Milan meetup. Every year I go to Design Week there, and I kind of avail myself of any students or alumni or faculty that are there and kind of guide them through Design Week. I've been going every year since, I don't know, 1998, so long enough to know better. But it's a confusing and intense and beautiful week that can be beneficial to have a guide on. So that's kind of an institutionalized project that I've been very happy to partake in and to share with students. And we exhibit all this stuff, and that's part of my role in the Vignelli Center is to, again, sort of evangelize and share the output from these different initiatives, whether it's study abroad or an exhibition that we pulled together that connects dots between different things. This is a junior colleague of mine who I've been mentoring, Melissa Dawson, and she teaches our, we call Soft Studio. She's an expert in textiles and soft goods. This is at Wanted, Brooklyn, I think a couple of years ago. I just finished this project right before COVID with Gary Hustwit, where we curated an exhibit in the Vignelli Center of his very intimate photos of Massimo and Lella, really beautiful exhibit. And, you know, these are just some of the things that I've been very involved in at RIT. I helped them with their redoing their master brand. As I mentioned, I'm very interested in different collection initiatives. So, you know, just moving ahead, you know, these are some of the things that are important to me in the Vignelli Center. And there are a lot of different objectives that we've followed. There are a lot of things that I'm considering now. I'm new to this position as director of the Vignelli Center as of last semester. So I'm quite involved in all these pieces as we kind of refine our mission. But essentially what I'm doing is culture building in teaching and doing research and scholarship, building on the modernist foundations that the Vignelli Center stands for, using it as a design hub. We are literally in the center of the RIT campus, which makes it an epicenter, really, to sort of radiate design excellence. You know, as we like to say, from RIT to the world, but also, you know, from the world back to RIT. Which amplifies the role of design and the Vignelli ethos. As the Vignelli say, design is one. It transcends the disciplines and looks through a singular lens. You know, I think as most designers know, a big piece of what we must do to evolve is to embrace technology. But it's also important to build on existing foundations. My role is in many ways to celebrate modernism, but just as important as the celebration of modernism is the questioning of modernism. Obviously, learning from the past and learning from history to design a better future. So for me, it's more than just a job. Design really is a lifestyle. It's a worldview. It's my lens. As I've said, I like to share this vision to empower others to make things better. I'm going to skip the 2-minute video because I think I've been talking for longer than I wanted. This is a wonderful quote, I think, from Massimo, and I'm honored that he thought this way about me. Um, but I want to thank you for the time. There's my social tag. My students tell me I have to put this in. uh, and that's that. So thank you. I'm going to stop the share now, I think, so we can take questions if you guys have time and interest.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. That was an amazing presentation, and your department looks so exciting. Congratulations. So we will open it up to our students and alumni. You guys can chime in as well, and just feel free to unmute yourselves and ask Josh a question. And Josh, also, if you have questions of our students, you can ask them too.
Sounds good. Well, I will certainly leave it open for you guys to ask me things first. And feel free to just raise a hand or speak up or whatever you want. I'm listening. Any questions out there?
I can ask the first question, actually. So I was struck at well, it's kind of a big question, so maybe you can answer it in a nutshell or something. But I was struck by the end when you said, you know, a lot of your work is celebrating modernism, but also questioning modernism. And so I'm wondering what that looks like or what that means, and how you discuss that with your students, maybe. So you
Sure.
can answer that in, you know, whichever way makes the
That's
most
an
sense.
awesome question. You know, uh, a big piece of my job is, you know, being a steward of the Vignelli's archive. When we have every cocktail napkin sketch, every communication, not every product, but most every product they ever designed. And we have scholars and, you know, professionals and individual students, faculty from all over the world who come to dig into the archives to do their research. Um, so I would never disparage the Vignelli's work in any way. But I think it's really important to know that it's not a shrine to the Vignelli's. The Vignelli's were adamant that their work be a nexus for dialogue. They had lots of opportunities with their archive. I mean, it could have ended up in a lot of places, but I can tell you that they chose RIT over, say, a major museum because they were completely uninterested in their work being enshrined in a museum collection, which would once every 50 years pull it out to stroke their dead egos. You know, they didn't need that kind of attention, and they didn't want that kind of attention. What they wanted was for their lives work to make a difference for the future. And that doesn't mean that everything that they presented was golden, right? They understood that there were trials and there were errors and there were successes. And the idea in keeping all the evidence was that we could be stewards of that content. We could talk about the things that were wonderful successes and the things that were abysmal failures. And so I do often find that people think that everything's perfect in the Vignelli Center and everything the Vignellis did was correct. But it's, you know, there was an aspiration, a platform from modernist tenants that they utilized to move their agenda ahead. But I think that what we truly believe in being stewards of this collection is that it's a place to contest those ideas as much as it is a place to celebrate them. So that's the important piece of that message. And there's so many amazing examples that we share on a regular basis of those kind of those confrontations and those collisions of ideas and goals. And I guess that's a topic for another day when you when you come and visit and have a look at the archives. I mean, there's some really wonderful material in there, and that's why it's at RIT, and that's why these things are teaching tools, because we're there as much to celebrate as we are to question. Does that get at your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I was also thinking while you were giving your presentation, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to, you know, have our students visit or cross paths or connect somehow. That would be really amazing.
Yeah, we'd
But
love to.
yeah, I'm sure the answer to that question could go in many different directions, but that's really interesting. Thank you. Oscar left a question in the chat. Oscar, do you want to read your question out loud?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much. It's an honor to have witnessed your lecture. Everything about it is amazing. My question to you regards polymaths and multidisciplinary talent, and how have you seen your alumni succeed in an industry that is constantly trying to make you one thing?
Well, I mean, is it true that the industry is trying to make you one thing? I'm not certain that's the case. I mean, I've been at it now for 20 some years, and I feel like the field of industrial design has become far more fluid in those 20 years than it was when I started out. And as a result, at least as an educator, I've felt an imperative to flex with it. We certainly do not feed the field, and I'm speaking in my former role as an industrial design director. We don't, on our program at RIT, feed the field with traditional product designers, uniquely. I think, we saw probably 5 or 6 years ago that about a quarter of our graduating class, so say 15 or 20 students, were doing their capstone research in the digital space. It was anti-product. So we immediately hired a faculty member, super talented guy, who is had no training in industrial design, was really a kind of a new media designer, I guess, at heart. And so the students that were interested in going into sort of digital media, but with the core principles of industrial design process and thinking, wound up in that section of senior studio and capstone to sort of give themselves the platform to advance in that area. Around about the same time, we saw a huge interest from students in soft goods, which is, it's like this fuzzy place for industrial design to play. Sneakerheads go into sneaker design. Is it soft goods? I'm not so sure. But we realized that there was really a trend that demanded expertise in that area that wasn't traditional industrial design hard goods. And so we hired this remarkable woman, who I showed some pictures of her student work, Melissa Dawson, and she's become our, there's the Meta project, and then there's Soft Studio, and we get about a quarter of the students every year going towards senior year wanting to do soft goods design. And that's not just bags. It's could be footwear, could also be material exploration. Many of them, like we have this young woman at Steelcase now, and all she does is composites for them and all kinds of interesting kind of soft goods research. That wouldn't have been possible without kind of seeing those trends and that sort of way in which the field is spreading out and away from hard product. So so I guess I'm trying to answer your question, but also give you some more context. I guess we in design education have been at RIT thinking about that expansion of the field by maintaining a foothold and a strong identity as a broad general program, right? Rather than being a program that sort of specifies in one way, like, in Detroit, they're really, like they do automotive, right? That's sort of what they do, or that's the ethos, or I don't know. There are lots of programs that have a specificity about them. We try to maintain this general approach and bring in, folks who have very, very dynamic kind of different experiences than traditional industrial design, with a healthy dose of folks who do have industrial design experience to sort of fill in the gaps. I think where the industrial design core, let's say, values and process are key are in the early years of our undergraduate programs. I think in the third and fourth year of the undergraduate programs, that's when we like to create these differences and empower students to go lots of different ways. Graduate program is a different story, which I could speak to. But does that start to get at your question at all?
I personally love the answer, and I think that the environment that you provide is probably what leads to that success more than anything else.
Well, sure. So much of what we have to do is create a healthy environment for collaboration and innovation. And it's so hard to tease out the parts of that, like the RIT is not the best school in the world, right? I mean, it's just one really good one, just like SVA is one really good one, and Cranbrook is a really good one, and art centers, they're just all these great flavors, which are different one from the next. What makes RIT different, and this is not a sales pitch, it's just like what it is that we are a university, a big freaking university with 18,000 warm bodies in it, a robust engineering school, a robust business school, health sciences, liberal arts. I mean, I'm there because I studied at Cornell as an undergraduate, which is another great, big, university. And then I went to a little design school, which is a great art and design bubble in RISD. And for me, I get a RISD inside of a Cornell at RIT. And that, if you go back to that diagram I showed, the map with the Vignelli Center in the center, for me, I'm like a kid in a candy store, because if I reach out from that center point to engineering and to material science and packaging design, and health care and all those other players, we've got our built-in kind of innovation kickstarters all over the place. So I think that's part of what you do is you create these conditions, whether it's on your program or in your university, you work with what's around you. The Vignelli Center it is different, right? It's just this incredible asset that we have. And so I'm delighted that that's part of our DNA now. It wasn't there, 10 years ago. So now it is. These programs are all different, and the success, the formulas for success are all different. But anyway, that's a little bit of it.
I think I understand why Oscar asked that question, because I kind of wish sometimes people like you would come talk to the people we work with. I don't know. I've just heard it so many times in meetings how they will not hire polymaths because they're not good at anything. They do a little bit of everything and they don't do anything very well. But then when you look at even just the work of Massimo, like, he was a total polymath. That's what made him a great designer. Like, what he was doing, the graphic design informed what he was doing in the industrial design work. And I think when we come out of our grad school bubble, we just have to work on our own to, like, kind of work on that itch of making. Like, I'm also a digital designer now, but I was a maker before I went to POD, and now I have my side projects that are I do at night and the weekends. And actually, I had a question about that, because I'm a maker, so I have this tendency to just want to make the things that I design, but I'd like to move into the trying to see if I could manufacture some of these things.
Mhm.
How do you, aside from, I guess, partnering with people like AreaWare and Kickerland, have you ever industrialized your product on your own, and like, how do you go about that?
Well, the short answer is yes. I have tried to do it, but when I did it, it was a different world. So I tried producing some projects in like 1997. So sort of pre-real internet. Manufacturing for me had to be local because I had no money, and I learned in that experience that in order to be successful, I would have to spend years of my life working on one widget. To be successful with producing a lamp or a doorstop, your whole life would be just that, like creating the business, the distribution, the funding, all those things. And I realized in going through the exercise of just getting it sorted out and getting it kind of ready for production, that was absolutely not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be someone who followed a certain template which exists in the world, with designer author making a project for a company. And that is by no means the only way to have fun. But that was what I saw at that time. And I said, that's what I want to do. And then, as I said, I became really passionate about teaching. And not long after that, I met a girl and, married her and had kids and needed to think about buying a house and, all those things. And so I thought, okay, my time is precious. Like, what do I want to do with it? And so for me, the template works of being a designer author only when the company respects that formula. And I can tell you, there are lots and lots of companies that don't, or that mistreat designers or don't understand their role. I know this is easy for me to say because I've been around the block, but the truth is that I just don't want to work with companies that don't get it. And so I don't. And I've been there. There are not so many valuable things about getting old, right? Your body gets creakier. But one of the nice things is that you understand what you like. Half of life is learning what you don't want to do. And so I've learned a lot of those things. And so I like this template. I like the mix. My advice to you, though, is really to try to explore all the things that you like exploring, all those aspects. I mean, we've heard the word polymath a couple of times. It doesn't have to be a scary or bad word, but I kind of think we all are polymaths in some ways. I think if you're able to bring your passions together in your career, you'll be much more satisfied with the decisions that you make. And I know that's an incredibly easy thing for you to hear, and a complex thing for you to really do. And it'll take years and years and years for you to pull it together and do it. But it does. It is true. If you can bring your passions and your various kind of endeavors together, they'll coalesce in meaningful opportunities and projects. So I guess that's a wild way of answering your question, but there you go. Any other questions out there? I'm happy to keep talking. So
yeah. Hi.
Hey.
Thank you for this lecture. It's been really interesting. You mentioned a couple times throughout the lecture the idea that grad students are better off when they feel like they're professionals. And I'm just sort of curious where the inspiration for that idea came from and what sort of formed that theory.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. I found and I found consistency over the years in this, whether it's with graduate or undergraduate students, that there's a trend that I've observed, and who knows, it could just be with the students at Philadelphia University and RIT. It could be very different in other places, but I've certainly seen a practical underlay in students' desire to advance their own agenda. Like, what does this mean in the scope of my career? When you're dealing with an undergrad who's like a freshman, all they want to do is start making the stuff they signed up for. If they're an industrial designer, they want to make stuff. They want to make products and furniture and experiences on day one. And, it's, if they have to learn how to think or how to understand color theory or learn to draw, it's boring, right? And granted, these are, 18-year-olds, but, there's something in that, which is, leverageable as an educator. Like, could you give them something that makes them feel like a professional while they're, getting those skills? I mean, I don't have all the answers, but we've done different exercises in our programs that have created that platform. Sophomores make 6 lamps, the same thing 6 times, right? What does that teach them? It teaches them repetition and organization and, kind of optimization and all these things, which are useful down the line in a much deeper way. But on a surface level, it's giving them this gratifying experience of doing what they signed up for, even though it's a skill builder. And then, let's go to the campus union and sell them. You're gonna have to price these out, and let's see if people buy them. So exercises like that can sort of scratch that itch that a young person wants when they think they know what they want and they think they know what they've signed up for. So I guess that's a bit of, the way I've thought about that. And, as a student works through 4 years, it's such a formative time, right? Their brains finish forming in those 4 years. And it's a huge evolution in 4 years. And by the time they're in their senior year, to have the opportunity to walk like a designer, and to work with a client and to see something go into production is magical. I mean, like I shared with the kid who has, 20 projects in production with AreaWare now, it was a magical transformation that set him on his path. It's not for everyone. Not every kid walks out of that studio with the same results, but they all witness the same thing happen. And they see that, oh, it's attainable. I watched it happen. I saw the steps. It's something I can achieve. And I think that's a big piece of, fostering excellence is decoding the mystery and sharing the opportunity. I mean, it's not the School of Hard Knocks. I'm holding their hands. I mean, you're having something similar go down with MoMA right now, I presume. MoMA doesn't just happen. MoMA happens because Alan has spent his entire career being an awesome human being and a dedicated professional and won awards and said the right things and wrote the right things. And, like that's why MoMA happened. And he's sharing that with you. And if you follow his lead and hold his hand, you will have the same experience, and you'll be able to build a career off of it. It's a remarkable opportunity. So I may be preaching to the choir here, I don't know, but I do believe that these sorts of real world experiences are are useful in that way. Does that get at what you were asking?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions that you guys have? I'm seeing just now, I wasn't even looking, but there's stuff happening in the chat showing my age.
It seems
Go ahead.
like there's a gap. It's like a decade-old question that I've been asking people, if you don't mind me.
Sure.
I feel like the fear that one faces when trying to produce something is overwhelming, and almost the ability to overcome it is what leads to success. So is this something that you yourself have experienced, and what is your recommendation to us?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that's a question that's always been out there on some level. It's maybe more acute now that you in a way you have an idea and you just type in a couple of terms in a Google search and oh shit, that's already happened 50 times. Why should I bother? Again, it sort of goes back to this weird thing that I was starting to say, which is to sort of trust your instincts and trust that all the experiences that you have make you unique and give you a voice which is different from the next person. I do really believe that all good design is built on previous design explorations. That's just my personal take. That others may really feel that there are giant innovative leaps that happen, but I really feel that design is an exercise in incremental advancement, and that may be more true now than ever. In a way, thankfully, because we're now recognizing all of the predecessors, and more people are becoming visible in the dialogue that were obfuscated previously for terrible reasons and stupid reasons. And so I think that if you think of it through that lens, like that you're carefully refining a dialogue versus trying to make a statement that's wildly different, then there's some solace in that and some feeling of encouragement. I stopped at a certain point trying to make a statement. Like when I look back at the scope of my career and my projects, I feel like a lot of the stuff that I hit the ground running on was about saying something that was different, finding a really different way to say the same thing or whatever. And now I'm much more interested in that careful adjustment that makes things a little bit better or accessible or more meaningful. And maybe that's what Alan was getting at when he was saying, like, oh, these things are perfect or they're beautiful, which it's wonderful compliment from Alan, but I don't quite see them that way. I usually see the things that I continually need to improve or I haven't gotten just right. But I think that's the sort of studied resilience or perseverance that comes with trying to make those refinements to get things right. I don't know if that helps, but it helps me in thinking about how to make those improvements, and know that it's never easy. And I question every idea that I put out there. And it's usually the partnership with an industry, partner that makes it work, right? Because it's not just me thinking, okay, this is going to be a good idea. It's me with the experience and wisdom of a company or an organization that that's bread and butter is moving, the global dialogue forward that says, we also think this is worthwhile. And again, I'm not saying you can't just do your thing on Kickstarter, but for me, it's that partnership that that makes it viable or easier. I mean, not to go on and on, but a lot of times students ask me, like, what's your success rate with ideas? And I'm pretty organized. I keep all my project files digitally, and I've got a file of around 500 fully baked projects that have been courted by manufacturers over nearly 30 years now. And I've probably had 40 things go into production. So if you think about that kind of rate of success versus failure, it's pretty substantial, right? And I actually, for the most part, agree with most of the things that never made it. When I look back, I'm like, yeah, these were just not great ideas. And I have some ideas that are still sitting on the block that I really believe in, and that I feel like their time will come. I could be wrong, but sometimes that happens. So, yeah, I know. So I saw that in the chat, Alan. Somebody once told me, after reading my book, it was an intern who had worked in my studio, and said, your book was good, but you need to do another one about your filing system. So I don't know. It took me a long time to do that first book. I'm not so sure. Anyway.
That'd be great for orientation, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions out there? I enjoy doing this. I could talk all night, but I recognize that you guys have work to do too. So let me know if you're ready to chime out.
Yeah, it's been a great Q&A. Thank you for all of your answers. Maybe if someone is holding on to one question, we'll wrap up with one more and then call it a night.
Sounds good. And you guys can always feel free to email me. Alan, if you can just share my email after this with the group, feel free. I'm a writer, an emailer. Happy to connect with you guys later.
Great, thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah, any last questions or one last question?
All right, we can call it quits then. All
right. Well, thank you so much, Josh. This has been awesome. So much good advice, and it's been fascinating getting to know you and your amazing program and all the work that you've done. We'll be in touch soon, and be safe and take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And you are all more than welcome to visit us at RIT when it's safe to do so. I will gladly roll out the Vignelli red carpet for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Josh.
Have a good night, everyone.